Every Sunday evening in summertime, she sat at the front window and watched until he came up the hill. Her hands on the horsehair rests of the chair were like pieces of stone-grey paper, painted with thin lines of watercolour, palest blue, the skin transparent and the fingers crabbed over the little palms. She sat surrounded by a mass of greenery in brass and china pots set about on bamboo stands. The curtains in the big bay window were like blankets of red chenille. The old-fashioned gas brackets over the mantel-shelf bore opaque globes of pink, and under them were ornaments of twisted yellow glass, from which sprouted dead stalks of feathery brown reed and bunches of paper spills. She made the spills for Luther with her own hands every Saturday. Whenever he came round the corner of the long, steep hill, she always thought that he looked, in his black suit and carrying the black fiddle case, so much like a doctor. She had in mind particularly Dr. Farquharson's bag, because it was the bag she had known best. It had brought her the 12 children, beginning with Luther. He walked with a slight groping roll, big feet splayed out as if he wanted to grip the hill with his toes. His feet had always been bad. They'd been bad ever since the time he was a child, and had grown so fast that she could never afford to buy shoes to catch up with him. When he came into the room at last, it was always with a series of bungling, noisy clashes, as he tried to find a resting place for the fiddle case, somewhere among the many little tables, the piano, the bookcase, and the chairs. He could never find room for that damn fiddle, he thought. The bookcase and the piano were both locked up, polished as glass, and she kept the keys on a chain. He groped among the chairs with a bull-like stupor, but she never at any time took a great deal of notice of it. He'd always been clumsy on his feet.
It'll be dark before you get up here one of these days.
I had a rush job on. Wonder I got finished at all.
When he had at last disposed of the fiddle, he liked to sit by the piano in the dark patch caused by one end, so that she could not see his face.
Who was it?
She said.
Thought you said trade was so bad.
So it is. Man in Canal Street, burying tomorrow.
What man?
A man named Johnson.
Who's he? What name?
Johnson. Call him Polly Johnson. Kin to Liz Johnson.
Oh, nobody I know. You can take your coat off.
She liked him better with his coat off. The absence of the coat revealed a man of gross, crusty width, with watery blue eyes staring beerily from a face fired by summer to lines of smouldering bruisey red. His collar stud pressed brassily on his thick throat, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up above arms, massive and blackly haired.
All on 'em gone chapel?
Rose and Clarice and Will have gone. Lawrence and Nell went this morning.
Lawrence and Will were good boys, steady boys, fellows with enough ambition to get good jobs and enough sense to hang on to them when they got them. They did not approve of Luther, but then they did not understand him.
Ain't been out nowhere this week, I reckon. Too hot for you.
Went to Rose's Thursday,
she said.
Get the bus.
Boss? What do you think my legs are for?
Well, you want to get the bus, he said. One of these days you'll be doing that traipse up there once too much and you'll be dropping down.
If I do, you'll be there measuring me out afore I'm cold,
she said swiftly.
I warrant that.
Oh, don't sit there horse-facing so much. You're horse-faced to much behalf.
Don't you tell me I horse-face,
she said. He did not answer. It pained him when she horse-faced at him. He dreaded the day when he would be measuring her out. His only compensating thought about that was that he would make her something very nice, something really high-class and lovely, something fitting and worthy of the old lady.
Anything to eat? I could do with a mite of something.
Well, you know where the pantry is. Don't expect me to put it in your mouth for you, do you?
Daylight was fading a little when he came lumbering back into the room with hunks of jam tart and cheese, and bread and cold new potatoes, and a slice of cold Yorkshire pudding on a plate. He sat with the plate on his knees. He knew that he had to be careful of the crumbs. He knew that she would horse-face if he dropped the crumbs. but the taste of the new potatoes and the cold Yorkshire pudding were the taste of all the summer Sunday evenings of his boyhood, and he crammed them in with blind-eyed pleasure, bolting them down, licking thick red lips, and wishing to God she had a pint in the house to wash them down. She muttered at last,
Anybody'd think you never had a mite in your life. Don't she ever get you nothing o' Sundays?
Well, I'll never care whether I get much of a Sunday, he said.
Don't look like it,
she said. That was the worst of his mother, he thought. She couldn't hit it off with Edna.
You can get yourself a spill when you want one,
she said. Edna was a bit easy-going. She'd let herself go a bit, perhaps, after the last baby. She was a bit sloppy round the middle. The chief thing was, she didn't nag him. By the time he had finished eating, it was almost dark, and he got up and did the thing he always did without fail every Sunday. He lit one of the gas lamps above the mantel-shelf, and he filled his pipe and lit one of her paper spills from the gas mantle and put it to his pipe. There were 3 moments she really waited for all evening, and this was the second of them. The first was when she saw him turn so like a doctor with a fiddle case at the bottom of the hill. The second was the moment of the gas lamp, the pure white glow on his face, the great sucked-down flame, and the smoke puttering across the room in blue string clouds. When the pipe was really going, she knew what he was going to do next. She began unconsciously to finger the keys of the piano and the bookcase that hung on the chain round her neck. That was the third moment, the moment when he reached for the fiddle case and undid it and opened it and took out the bow. He had begun to play the fiddle when he was 7 years old. That had been her ambition for him, a fiddler, a violinist, a great player of the violin in the household. Mr. Godbold, who had been a fiddler himself in a great orchestra in Leicester or Birmingham or some other big city up in that part of the world, gave him lessons in his front room twice a week after school at 2 shillings a time.
"He has fine hands," Mr. Godbold said. "He will make a fine player. He's slow, but in the end he will make a fine player."
The walls of Mr. Godbold's front room were hung with many pictures of Mr. Godbold playing the violin, as a soloist or in orchestras or at social evenings and smoking concerts. She thought Mr. Godbold, in pieces like The Spring Song and excerpts from Mariana and Il Trovatore, played like an angel, and she thought it would be wonderful if Luther could rise as far as that. The first winter he persevered through many exercises, and the second winter he came to his first piece, Robin Adair. Luther stuck at Robin Adair. He played it through for a whole winter, and then his hands began to grow. By the time he was 12, he was a big, awkward gargoyle of a boy, in whose hands the violin looked effete and fragile. She thought by that time he could play beautifully. Perhaps not quite as beautifully as Mr. Godbold. Perhaps it only seemed to her almost as beautiful because he was so very young.
You want the key?
She said. She took it off the chain and held it out to him. The sound of the fifths as he spaced them out on the piano was, she thought, a most wonderful thing. That was the true violin sound.
"Play the old un,"
Luther said, but she said nothing because she knew he never began with any other. The time he took to play through Robin Adair always seemed to go by, perhaps because she shut her eyes, very quickly. It flew away on the song's own delicacy. After Robin Adair, he played several other pieces he knew, The Jolly Miller and Oh Dear, What Can the Matter Be? She thought he played better as he got older, but that, after all, was only natural. That was only as it should be. He was a man of over 50 now. He'd been playing the same pieces on the same violin for 40 years.
"Getting dark," Luther would say after the third piece. "Better be getting steady on home."
He sat with the fiddle case on his knee and the pipe and the violin in his right hand, waiting to pack up. There would just be time, he thought, to nip into the Unicorn and have a couple of beers, perhaps even 3 or 4 beers, before they closed at 10:30.
"Better put the key back afore you forget,"
he would say, and she would take the key from him and clip it back onto the chain. The poise of her hands, held for a second or two about her throat, was a signal that she gave him every Sunday.
Want me to give you another?
Have you got time? Don't hang about if you haven't got time.
Plenty of time. You just say and I'll play it. Want another? What's it gonna be?
Play me the old one, she would say. The old one was Robin Adair. As he played it, she stared beyond the smoky gaslight into spaces empty of shape. She sat ageless and tranquil, as if already embalmed among the greenery of fern pots, before a shroud of blanketing curtains under a gas-blue summer sky.
Ah, you can't beat the old uns,
Luther said.
They take a bit of beating.
She did not answer. She felt always that she could hear the sound of the strings long after they were silent. They were like the sound of pigeons' voices echoing each other far away in summer trees, and in the sound of them was all her love.